homes that have been provided at Tolman Creek or Tolman and Coleman Creek, and letting folks know that asking them if they would be interested in purchasing that unit from FEMA. And the language in there sort of reminded folks and has brought up that there is a looming, in some sense, deadline on that direct housing mission. So when FEMA originally implements a direct housing mission, their default time period is 18 months from the event. So as of right now, by the letter of the rule, that FEMA direct housing mission would expire on March 22nd. And the state will be applying to extend that housing mission. And every indication that we've had from FEMA is that they are, welcoming that, encouraging that, expecting that, and expecting that it will very likely be successful. However, we're not doing it right now because the FEMA rules say they need to evaluate the housing condition 90 days out from the end of the mission. So they want to look at or they are required to look at where we are at in terms of our housing constraints and needs of survivors towards the end of the approved period. So in December, Office of Emergency Management will be putting together that application and requesting to FEMA an extension of that housing mission. And one of the ways that relates to the potential purchase of trailers by the folks who are in them is that folks who have said that they would like to purchase that unit are being asked to sign a lease agreement that would start on March 22nd to keep the trailer where it is. Because as far as FEMA looks at it from a legalistic standpoint, their participation will be, at this time, the way they see it, will be ending on March 22nd. So we are working with OEM to get some clear answers on, do they have to sign that agreement? What happens if they don't sign that agreement and say that they want to move ahead with the purchase, to play out a couple of those scenarios. I think the other important thing for you all to be aware of as part of that opportunity, well, a couple more things to be aware of as part of that opportunity is, one, FEMA does have the flexibility to lower the purchase price to, I think there's a minimum 25% of market value based on financial hardship of the people in it. So they don't just have to do an appraisal and say, this is the price. If somebody can't afford to pay that price, they can lower the purchase price significantly. The other thing to be aware of is those trailers that are not sold to the folks who are in that trailer will be made available to local governments and nonprofits for on a donation basis. Representative Marsh has asked OEM to begin a conversation with FEMA. Could we have sort of a collective discussion, an organized discussion about how that takes place, rather than just going to a come one, come all kind of application free for all? So we could come up with a community plan of what really makes sense to work together on taking advantage of that. So I'll stop there. We hope to share a few more details in the upcoming LTRG R3V newsletter. And certainly want to invite Rep. Marsh to say anything that she's hearing that I'm missing, because we're both involved in these conversations.
Yeah, Stephen, can I jump in? Is it okay to jump in? So Alex did a great job of explaining what has been a very confusing situation with the FEMA trailers. I think the thing I want to add is for this to make sense as an alternative choice for residents to a purchase of a FEMA trailer, there's a whole bunch of questions that need to still be answered. Like, are those park owners going to continue long-term in the business? What's the monthly rent going to be? What kind of services are they going to provide? Because right now, if you visited those parks, you know it's trailers and gravel. I think it's really important that people who are in those trailers feel like they can take a deep breath, that there is no pressure to make a decision about that, and that we will be pulling together much more information so that they understand the totality of what it would mean to buy one of these trailers for their family, as well as something about alternatives that are being developed in the community so that they can look at the variety, or we hope a diversity. We're not quite yet there to diversity, but we've got more than one option for them in looking at where they may want to settle or how they want to settle in the community, so that they, again, don't feel like a FEMA trailer is the only choice. It may be a terrific choice. It may not be. We want them to have the time to evaluate it.
Thank you, Representative Marsh. That's great, and it really tees up our next our discussion that I'd love to kind of get everybody's experience and best thinking on, which is, first of all, what are the questions that are still open around the direct housing mission that you're hearing? So that Alex is doing a great job of really diving in with OEM and with FEMA and trying to figure out how this is actually going to work. And so we would love to, if you can drop it in chat or just unmute yourself. And what questions are you hearing from the street, or what questions are in your mind around what else do we need to know about this direct housing mission and this transition period? And then we'll get to the question of the alternatives that Representative Marsh just brought up. Has anybody heard? I mean, so Alex, what are some of the questions that you have? You have a little bit of an FAQ growing, I believe. Might be good to bring that up.
That too, if you like, Alex.
Sure.
Go ahead, Tucker. Tucker had a conversation with Dagoberto that is informing a lot of what I'm asking FEMA.
Yeah, that was one of the things that came up at one of the LTRG meetings. Is there's a lot of questions here that we're wondering about. That he's wondering about specifically because he has a number of folks that are connected to his organization that are in the FEMA trailers that it's just not clear to them. And I think it all boils down to what can we say about some of the conversations that aren't done yet, that are happening. Like, we know that the state of Oregon is planning on filing extension, but sometimes that gets tricky in being able to just say that. So the questions that he was bringing forth were, there's a rental agreement that they're signing that maybe take effect after the FEMA mission's over on March 22nd. And I think it was sort of a stopgap rental agreement, it's my understanding. And what happens if I don't want to sign it? Does it keep me out of the trailer from taking occupancy of it? What exactly is set to happen in March when that mission runs out? What if the state doesn't file an extension? And then what if I decide to purchase the trailer, as Pam was mentioning? What happens to that trailer? Does it have to move off the lot? Does it go into a GSA thing? What's my responsibility if I wish to purchase the trailer? I think the answer to it, I think Pam said it best, was just the answer in a lot of ways is take a deep breath. Like it's not happening coming out of the sky, dropping on your head, but there's a lot of confusion out there, and some of the communications just aren't happening in a very compassionate, trauma-informed way. Sometimes it feels rushed for them, and so I think that a lot of questions just relate around that sort of the opacity of the process.
Has anyone else? So that's great, Tucker. Thank you for that. Has anyone else heard other questions from their clients or just in the community around how this is going to happen?
Karen Chase had a question in the chat.
Okay.
And Karen was asking about the energy efficiency of those trailers, and which I think is a really good one. I won't say my hunch, but we'll see if we can pin them down more definitively.
And Alex, I don't know if you'll remember, but it's probably been a year now, maybe not quite, but right from the beginning, there was some interest in purchasing these trailers. And Christina and I talked with the FEMA reps back, I want to say in October or November last year, just to get a handle on, sort of the quality, because we anticipated that that vulnerable populations and vulnerable survivors of the fire were going to be inclined to hold on to what they get. And then the community inherits a cadre, a population of old FEMA trailers for housing that then lives on into eternity. And so it's like, and here we are. So I'm glad I was able to tune in today to just raise this as an issue.
Another question that I had that I think I've got the answer on is this going to be a rolling thing? Do they ask for 6 months and then they get 6 months, or as far as an extension on the direct housing mission? And what I'm hearing is that it is flexible. It is sort of up to the state to sort of ask for what we think we need. And so it is there's not a clear answer. I think it is helpful to share with folks that it is not uncommon for these missions to be extended, and there is precedence for them to be extended for years.
I think it's also, I was just going to add, as weird as it is for many of us to understand, we've repeatedly learned that this is the first time FEMA's ever put a housing mission on a manufactured home site. And their model that they're used to is taking as I understand it, a bare piece of land, put down a bunch of trailers. Their mission is to leave the land as it was when they came. So all these trailers disappear and they never have to deal with them again. Here we have quite a complexity of having the engagement of a private owner and the inability to really, we have very few places, no places to move these trailers to within our community. So I'm not sure. I think we're going to have to help FEMA think through the questions and the information that is required when you have, this particular kind of setup, because they've just never done it before. We have to have a whole participation of the owners of these parks.
And to Guy's question in the chat, they essentially are single wide manufactured homes. They do sometimes bring in travel trailers, but I believe almost all, if not all of these are actually manufactured homes. Kim?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Kim Travis, Urban Housing and Community Services. A question, Tucker, for you. Does the LTRG have the names of the participants in the direct housing program? Have they signed a release of information, or is there any point of contact other than FEMA that has the information about people participating in that program?
I don't have the answer to that. My understanding is no, but that might be a better question for Pam.
We have asked, Access is interested in that for its housing navigation, to be able to notify people who live in those trailers of opportunities that come by. And the answer we've heard, at least in our meetings that Alex and I sit in, is no.
Who would be the natural body entity to collect that information? It seems like it's an asset that we need as a community.
FEMA has it.
FEMA has it. Okay, so then we're back to the whole information sharing loop. Okay.
It's a good way to ask the question, though, Stephen. I mean, it wouldn't be that much work to go out and canvass those trailers and just collect phone numbers. Or
that might be an interesting thing for zone captains to begin to do. And I know, Tucker, you're in some conversations with at least the folks at Road Community Health around doing something similar. So it seems like it's essential to what would be a useful tool at this point. I have another question about this, and it's, so that we have these assets, they're single wise, they may not be very environmentally friendly, but they are housing that can be used in an emergency. I wonder if the state has any visions, or anybody has any visions around not letting those go, because we kind of know that something could happen again. And is there a place where they could be staged so that we could rapidly deploy them where they're needed, whether that's the bootleg fire or, God forbid, Cascadia decides to slip or something like that. Just wondering if there's been any conversation around that.
So my understanding is of the time frame is such that the sales to individuals happens, and then, as Alex said, it converts to a donations program, and it sounds like we're going to have thoughtful conversation about how that can be set up. But my understanding is that then the donations program is whatever entities are running that program are required to rent the unit to that individual for a minimum of a year. So I think that they, the trailers remain an asset for this particular disaster. And then I think it's a really great question about what happens, a year or further down the road. And they would be, my understanding is that they would be owned by those entities that are part of that donations program. So they could stay in the community, I think, is the idea. But, I think that crossing that road and really understanding what that means sounds like we'll put that in the mix of this set of questions for FEMA. I don't know, Alex, if you know any more than that.
That was helpful, Kim. Thank you.
Kim, when you say required to rent to them, so they're on manufactured home sites where they pay rent to the park owner. Are you talking about rent? Just they have to have renters there? They have to have someone living there? They don't actually have to take money from those people because they're already paying money to the park.
Right. So my limited understanding of the donations program is that as part of being a recipient of the donation, that entity would continue housing that participant. So depending on if the unit needs to be moved out of the commercial park that it's in or other places, you'd have to figure out what that structure looks like, but that the entity that's receiving the donated units would continue to house that participant in that unit.
Is that for an undetermined amount of time?
My understanding is that it's a minimum of a year.
Okay.
So are we saying that people are not going to get evicted in March if they decide not to buy their trailer? Then they're guaranteed another year?
I think that what we're saying is that the donations program, and Alex, I'm sorry, I just jumped right in because I know bits and pieces of this program as well, but I think that the conversations that Rep. Marsh and Alex are trying to convene would really try to look strategically at that donations program and how it could be structured, what entities would then, take over those units and continue renting to people. But I think that the take-home message is that we'll be applying for an extension to the program itself beyond the middle of March. So they likely, the eviction, your question about eviction in March is really, I think, off the table because we will be working to get an extension for the overall program.
Okay.
That's the biggest fear, right? It would be really nice to be able to tell people, no, you're not going to get evicted, at least. We'll figure out the details, but no, you won't be kicked out in March.
Yeah, that's a really important point because we're all in these conversations, but the folks living in those trailers are usually not, and they do not know what their fate is. They just know there's a March deadline looming. So I'm wondering who is the appropriate party and at what point can communication be clarified and made to those folks?
Well, so just one thing to be clear, like each of these people has a FEMA, I don't remember the exact name, but so they are working directly with, and as I understand, FEMA is actually doing follow-up calls to anybody that they haven't had. So people are asked to sign a piece of paper saying, I'm interested. They're calling everybody who they haven't got that back from, just to make sure that they got the invitation and make sure that they understood it. So I think the first thing we need to make sure is to make sure that we understand exactly what FEMA is telling them. So we're not contradicting anything that FEMA is telling them. And then I think because then to your point, I think we do have to fill in some of the gray spaces as well and provide some assurances about things that are very likely to happen that FEMA can't necessarily promise would happen. But until we know exactly what FEMA is saying, I don't know that we can really take those steps.
Okay, and thank you for that, Kim. It sounds like the direct housing participants are in monthly touch, at least with FEMA representatives. So hopefully they're getting the clarity, but we're hearing from the street that some people are still not clear. And that's
Absolutely.
really, I guess it's a little bit like calling the IRS or something. You might get slightly different information. Yeah, so where do you, Alex, I mean, and anybody who locally, it sounds like there's a need for some local actor to think about this conversation, really understand what FEMA is saying, and then maybe fill in some of those gray areas. Does anybody have any thoughts on who that might be? It's probably somebody in the county, not at the state level, I would imagine, but.
Stephen, what OEM and FEMA had originally suggested was to do a briefing for all of the community-based organizations that work with these folks. I'm going to continue to push for that. I think given that there is one source of official information, which is FEMA, I don't know that, I think, and these individuals trust a variety of other organizations, right? Depending upon who that individual and who they have a relationship is. So I think it's more a matter of sharing that information as broadly as we can with the concerned community-based organizations that are interacting with folks.
So Stephen, this is Pam. If I could just add to what Alex said. On October 20th, I'm going to be doing a manufactured housing webinar to put together for people all the information that they need if they want to get back into manufactured housing, where you can, what your options are, including a new state option that we'll be talking about, we'll say something about private parks, and we'll have somebody yet to be determined on there to talk about the FEMA program to outline it. We will also have access and the state manufactured home office there to talk about financing mechanisms. So the hope is that if you tune into this and that we get the case managers and everybody who's touching people who are trying to figure this out in, that we can provide the collective information that we need to get back in. People at OHCS and in the governor's wildfire office understand that we have to have a cogent narrative around the FEMA trailers that is much more than, you might be able to buy one. And they are, I think, thinking hard about who's going to take responsibility for that.
That's great. That's great to hear. And just let us know how we can help get the word out to make sure as many people are in that meeting as possibly can be. That's great. Marta, you had a question.
Marta, we're not hearing you. If you made to press *6 or something.
How about now?
Yep.
Thank you so much. I apologize. I'm usually on video. As part of the narrative and a part of the value proposition to those who are considering buying the trailers, sounds like in chat somebody addressed that they are treated like manufactured homes, but I wonder if there is an actual, for lack of a better word, actuarian table, sort of, or a table that talks about the value and how those homes, when properly maintained, store their value. So that is a part of that financial literacy that we, through those valued community-based organizations, are offering to survivors so they can do their own calculus, you know, and maybe they work with the home purchasing counseling through Access to figure out if that's a scenario they want to pursue. I just think we can, you know, with the efforts of this group, of the collective impact, we can build that educational piece in, because I'm getting questions from community members, just how well do those trailers store value so their employees, you know, are in a good place and a financially advantageous and secure place going forward if they decide to go with this trailer as opposed to maybe a manufactured home somewhere else. Thank you.
That's an excellent point, Marta, and I think it even ties into Karen's point, which is about the energy efficiency and just the long-term operating costs. So total cost of ownership, right, is a real concern. We don't want to tie people into huge, you know, inefficient electric bills and other things going forward. So that's excellent. And Bill, you are asking about property taxes and user fees as well. Oh, I see. Right. So we've got some interesting conversation going on around taxes and property taxes, et cetera, in the chat. So one of the things, so are there any other questions around the direct housing kind of transition that we're going to be going through sometime in the next year or so? Any other questions that are coming up that we should kind of put on the list and kind of get into this frequently asked questions document that maybe can feed even into what you're doing, Representative Marsh, as we kind of collect some of these questions and answers. So, okay, if you have any more about direct housing, please jump in and let us know. The next item on the agenda is to think about, Representative Marsh, you were talking about, okay, what are your alternatives? If you don't want to buy, if you're really thinking clearly about buying this FEMA trailer or something else, what are the alternatives? And Tucker and Julie, I think, put together a map
on your post for the park.
So they put together kind of a good timeline of housing coming up, kind of the pipeline. And I know I've had a conversation with Joe Volmars from Access about their compiling a bunch of data. And I think that there's a really important piece of informing folks who need housing about what's coming, what's the pipeline, what does that pipeline look like, what are the criteria, et cetera. So we're thinking about how do we pull that together into a document that's really useful. And again, so we've thought that we would want to know what type of development is this? What's the housing type? Is it, you know, stick built or mobile or whatever? What's the location? And what are the eligibility requirements? But what other factors should we be thinking about putting into that document? Anybody who has clients who are, you know, actively looking for housing, what other variables should we put into that set of data? Just looking for thoughts. If anybody has them, that'd be great. I guess accessibility, I'm thinking of Don Bruland. Accessibility would certainly be on that list as well. Any other thoughts?
Obviously location, you know, how far from where they originally were, you know.
Yeah, we have location.
Okay.
Yeah.
was thinking, you know, access to schools or bus lines would be important. And I'll put in a plug for the dogs, that there might be a yard.
That's
Wouldn't
great.
want to have somebody move in to a place and then pull their little doggies away.
Yeah, so pet friendly or not. Yeah. And or yard space. That's a good. Ellie, go ahead.
Yeah, in addition to like criteria, also like how people are going to be prioritized, whether people with children will be prioritized,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera.
Okay. Great. Anything else? Just jump in, or or drop things into chat. We'll compile all of this together in our notes. Thanks, that's very helpful. And our goal is to make something that can be public facing and actually give people the data they need to start sorting out their alternatives. Don, do you have additional thoughts?
Well, also whether if they were to take one of these, how it might impact any benefits that they're on, governmental benefits or something, if it would go against in terms of people on Medicaid or some, the value of their deal, because that, I think that will concern a lot of very low income people that sometimes gifts have a other paying with them.
Okay, so if the housing is subsidized in some way, does that subsidization affect other benefits that you have? Is there a standard way to think about that? I'm not as familiar with affordable housing, so I don't know. Is there a standard term of art that refers to that variable?
I think you can get this through the state Medicaid staff. I mean, I know that affects a lot of people in terms of their ability to collect other resources, including potentially healthcare or other things. So, there may be no effect, but then they need to know that. But we don't want them to be surprised with.
It's often referred to as the benefits cliff.
Okay.
You reach a certain level of income and sometimes benefits count towards that income and all of a sudden you lose eligibility.
Okay, well, we'll dig into that. That's great. Thank you for bringing it to our mind. And yes, absolutely, proximity to public transport is also important. Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Another element of this housing equation that we've got is the kind of distributed housing or kind of accessory dwelling units and all of those, even shared housing. And so obviously Talent and Phoenix and Medford have all kind of loosened up their, and the state has changed some of the zoning laws in certain cities of certain sizes to allow for more density. The question now is, and beginning conversations with some of the municipalities around this, is what's the uptake and what can we, in terms of building more units, now that we've got the opportunity to do it, is how do we help people get over the hump to actually building those units? Is it, is it an educational question? Is it a motivational question? Or is it a financial question that is just impossible for them financially to swing it? Any thoughts on that? Or is there any resource that, or people who are studying that right now that we should know about? Because we're really interested in building some content around promoting the development of ADUs within the Rogue Valley.
I have a couple things to add there, Stephen. I know I shared as much as I kind of had in my inbox with you, but there's some important pieces. I think it's a mixture of all three: that education and sort of the funding options. And there are resources out there. Fannie Mae has a 30-year standalone ADU mortgage option that's come online as well. There are private lenders who specialize in ADU financing, nonprofit lenders. And then of course, the city of Medford, the 4, pre-approved ADU designs that have, I believe, IGAs with other municipalities. So those are a pretty cool pipeline for having, engineered plans more or less free of charge. So just, building sort of the constellation of resources and publicizing that in a big way might increase some of the uptake in the jurisdictions. My understanding is not many people are using that option. But an ADU goes up quicker oftentimes than your kind of forever home. So you can live in your ADU while your forever home is getting built. We're in a building bubble, materials bubble, and that's going down. But meanwhile, maybe you can live in a smaller house until you can afford to build your forever home. I think the rush, and that's mostly due to sort of insurance timelines and restrictions, is to get occupancy within a certain amount of time. And I'm not sure they have that flexibility to think that sort of progressively around the benefits of ADUs with the timelines they're currently given. So I think it's just an education piece and educating about all those other parts too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tucker. Anybody else? Thoughts on the promotion of ADUs or challenges?
One interesting idea is for the elderly to live in an ADU and rent out their house, right? So once they're kind of scaling down, they can put an ADU on their property, move out of their house and actually rent it. And that kind of provides some security as well in people on their property.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. Any other thoughts on ADUs as a solution?
I think one thing that could be slowing down maybe the adoption and uptake right now might just be so much legislation that has given renters a lot of protection and freedom from evictions. So I think that does give people some pause in thinking about that as an investment. But I think as some of the challenges with the pandemic and some of those things are a little bit more in the past at some point, that won't be an impediment that'll give people pause.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It makes some sense.
And I don't know, I know Rep. Marsh pays attention to a lot of things in the legislature and can't pay attention to all of them, but I wonder, are there any safe havens for owners who live on the same property from some of those rules? Because it does seem like that, I mean, if I think about, developing an ADU and being restricted from evicting somebody who's living in my backyard, that does feel like could be a pretty significant.
Yeah, there are some protections. I can't tell you exactly how they sit right now, but there are definitely some protections. If you are a single homeowner and have an ADU in your backyard, it works a little bit differently.
Yeah, so that's a piece of what we need to.
You're not, I don't think you're completely off the hook for all the rules, but there are some places that recognize that you have a direct personal impact in what's happening with your tenant.
Great. Okay, we'll look into that and add that to our whatever we put out, because that's an important factor. Thank you. Great. Well, I think now we're to the place where we would like to give Tucker the reins. I hope I can do that actually.
Are you talking about screen sharing? Give them to Sabra Kronk. She's there she is in the awesome green glasses.
Unfortunately, my computer is taken away all of my buttons for Zoom. I'm wondering if I can somehow get somebody else to be the co-host here. I'm going to see if I can.
You could assign that to me. I think I have that ability.
Yeah, let me see here. I'm sorry. This is very strange. I've never seen Zoom do this before. Or my computer. So I'm, I can't see the little buttons that on each person. I'm not sure what. Oh, so the buttons are still there. So that was polls. So I'm just having to go from memory.
See, if you have the participants button at the bottom, advanced participant options, I think you can make screen sharing by anybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. So what's odd is that I can't see.
Can't do that either. I got you.
Well, I'm actually, it's responding to clicks, but not to, it's very strange. I'm getting the ability to send polls, but not, my computers must be very low on memory or something. Not sure what to do from here. Let me see if I can return to the meeting. Sorry, this is very strange. I'm gonna try something. re-render my. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I can chat. Okay, here we go. Try now, Tucker.
To screen share?
Mm-hmm. Is it
Nope.
work? Is it allowing you?
It's not.
Well, how about now?
Nope. Zoom has been very, very uncooperative this last week.
Very strange. I'm not going to blame this on Zoom. I think this is my own machine who's overwhelmed.
Is it Sabra who's going to share?
No, it's Sabra. Yeah.
Well, if I can get this to work, everybody will be able to share, but I just try now, Tucker.
Unfortunately, no.
Well,
Stephen, if this may be goofy, but we could switch streams. I could drop a link to my room in the chat.
that may be the best thing because I cannot, let me see if I, it's strange. My screen is not re-rendering. Let's try that. I apologize, everyone, but that might be the best way to see Tucker's presentation here. So
Right.
you can do that.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
I dropped it in,
Go ahead.
and yeah, I'm
See you
gonna
all over there.
go over there.
Okay. Yep. I'll be there too. Sorry, everybody. Thank you. This has been a great meeting. Thanks so much. If I can get out of here. Here we go.